Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it is time for me to rank my top 5 MVP candidates halfway through the 2025 UFL season. That's right, it may feel like it's only been a couple weeks, but we are halfway through the 2025 regular season for the UFL, and it is time for me to give my top 5 candidates for the MVP award. Now, this list was somewhat difficult to make in the lower end. Essentially, I think most people would agree that there's really 4 guys that you kind of have to have on the list, but the number 5 spot legitimately has a few guys who could actually have an argument for it. But what's most important is because of how the season's playing out, we could see somebody not even make this list end up winning MVP because of the fact that we've really got like 6 teams fully in the playoff race, and 7 if Memphis with their additions. They recently added West Hills, brought David Davis back, come back. But this is my list, so let's just get right into it with number 5, Deon Cain. This is the shock pick, I know. I was debating on putting like Chris Odom here or maybe even Jay Adams, but the last couple of weeks, Adams hasn't done nearly as much as he did the first 3 weeks, so it kind of made it hard for me to put him on here. A lot of his yards were for the first 3 weeks. They got David Davis back. And then, of course, with Chris Odom, he's been great this season, but I don't feel like he's been that too dominant enough as a D lineman to justify it. I'm giving it Deon Cain. Deon Cain has missed 1 game, and in 3 of the 4 games they did play, and he led the team in receiving yards, and usually by a decent margin. Now, the biggest issue for him is that he's fumbled the ball twice, including one that was lost, but overall he is currently 5th in overall receiving yards despite missing a game, tied for 1st in overall receiving touchdowns at 2, which again is a lot, and 5th in receiving yards per game, which again shows that it's not just, one big game. It's the fact that he's been solid in all 4 games. His yak isn't the most insane, his overall receptions isn't the most insane. But when you think about the Stallions, this offense has been a very weak and disappointing unit. Pretty much the only player who's actually lived up to the hype that they've had is really Deon Cain. Everyone else has been weak at some point. The O-line allowing a ton of sacks in week 1. Magoo not handling pressure well. Matt Corral being pretty inaccurate, not consistent. Case Cookus not being super accurate. Great in the ground, but not super accurate. The run game, not great. Receivers, hit or miss. Deon Cain has led the team in 3 of their 4 games. He wasn't there for the Arlington game, and you felt that he wasn't there because that was a rough game. When you look at the past couple of weeks, he's been that number 1 guy for the team. Yes, they did just lose to Memphis, but it wasn't really because of him. He played a solid game. Again, this 5 spot, I feel like there's a few guys. There's probably like 2 other guys than the guys I mentioned that you could maybe make a case for. But for me, they're a team currently in the playoffs. They're a team that has had 3 different quarterbacks play, meaning that if a player from this team were to get MVP, it would most likely be a receiver, running back, or a defender, not a quarterback. Going with Deon Cain. Again, this is the one somewhat hot take. The other 4 are a matter of where you rank them. So let's just go to number 4, Jordan Ta'amu. Some people are going to have him at 1. I don't think you really can. Now, he has to be on this list, even for how much I've hated on Ta'amu this season. You have to keep him on here for the simple reason he's the best quarterback, or he's the quarterback on the best team. The only 4-1 team is the Defenders, and he's been the quarterback for all 5 games. Now, he is number 1 in a couple of key stats, that being yards and touchdowns. But passer rating, he's 4th, despite having so many touchdowns, because he's also tied for 2nd in interceptions thrown. Now, recently he's been doing a lot on the ground. Most of that 125 from the last 2 weeks, which he also has 2 more rushing touchdowns added there, which leads him to having almost 10 more points than any other player in the league. Yes, they're scoring a lot, but a lot of this is because the DC Defenders defense has gotten a lot of takeaways, which has allowed the offense to have many more opportunities. The fact is that sub-50 completion percentage number sticks out like a sore thumb, and even to another extent, the yards per pass. The 6.9 yards per pass, when you consider how much he's throwing the ball and how he throws, it's just really weird to watch him play because he'll make these deep throws that end up getting caught, but they were underthrown passes where they, end up losing yards they could have gotten. Or you have the one this past weekend where he should have thrown a game-losing interception. Instead, the defense bailed him out, gave him a second chance to be able to score. He is the reason this team will lose games, but he's not necessarily the reason they win games. They have not had a quarterback come in and actually play significant snaps. They had, DeLillo come in for a couple of plays when Ta'amu was banged up a bit. But we don't know what they have. But again, Jalen McClendon has looked very accurate when passing with the Roughnecks, which I think a lot of people would say is a weaker roster than this Defenders team, even with the injury to Ty Scott, obviously, and Aaron Smith not being what he was in 2023. But as for Ta'amu, you do have to put him on here because of the fact that he is up there in those quantitative stats. Again, you would rather see a quarterback lead in passer rating or completion percentage than overall yards because you can pretty much force anybody to lead a stat in yards when you're throwing the ball more than anyone else by a country mile. but he is still number one in those stats, and he's the quarterback on a team that really doesn't have a true number one guy anywhere. Yes, they have the current sack leader, but again, like with Chris Odom, there's not really a single defender on this team that you're like, man, that guy is clearly the best player on the defense by far, because you have a lot of really solid players. And when you have a lot of solid players, it actually hurts each other. Whereas the offense, with Ty Scott going down, it's pretty hard to look at who is the number one guy in offense. Some would say Roland, and that's probably the only one who has an argument. So as of now, it would be Jordan Ta'amu. So him having another huge, like 300 plus total yardage game this past weekend without Ty Scott makes him look good. I think 4 is a good spot for him. I personally don't think he should be in the top 3. I think that you have another quarterback who's clearly better than him, and you have 2 other guys who may not be quarterbacks, but in terms of their impact to their team and what they've done are more impressive. Number 4, though, Jordan Ta'amu. Number 3, I'm going with Najee Harris. I was thinking about 2, but the guy at 2 I just think has done a bit too much, but Harris definitely deserves this one. This has been one of the most consistent players in spring football. He was like an all-XFL player in 23, then he was an all-UFL player last year, and he's well on his way to being in again this year. Most interceptions in the league is currently him. Solo tackles, he's tied for 4th in the league. Tackles in general, top 10. And passes defended, tied for 1st in that stat. He also, of course, had the pick 6, which won them the game against the Battlehawks. That game, insane that it ended up being as close as it was. Renegades got their 8-point handicap at the start. But in the end, when Duggan was leading a potential game-winning drive, he got the pick 6 in the end zone, took it all the way back for the touchdown, obviously, and that gave the Renegades the win. Very important play, of course. Even this past week, he had that interception against Ta'amu, right, at the very end of the game. That should have iced the game, but the DC defense outplayed the Arlington offense and screwed him over. So, had Arlington have won this game this past weekend, Harris would be at number 2, because then you could easily say that's 2 straight games that he single-handedly pretty much won, in a sense, at the end of the game kind of deal. I feel like he has to be above Ta'amu for that reason. I feel like he's actually contributing more in terms of this team winning. Yes, Chris Odom has been great this season, but a lot of that pass rush has only been the past couple of weeks, whereas Harris has been a top corner pretty much this whole season. 3 interceptions in the first 5 games. I mean, we're not going to see a Channing Stribling 2022 season anytime soon. This is pretty much as close as you can get. And then you also add in the fact that he did force a fumble and get the recovery. That's 4 turnovers he's caused by himself. Number 3, I think, deserves to be Najee Harris, best corner in the league right now. Give him a lot of credit here. Have him at 3. Number 2 is Jacob Saylors, the best running back in the league last year and is continuing that this season. Now, rushing-wise, he hasn't been insane. He's been great. 3.4 or 3.9 yards per carry is really good considering how this league's been this year, especially when you consider that he hasn't had one of those, like, Kalen Ballage 70-yard rushes that just super inflate that total. His longest is only 25. But he's averaging damn near 4 yards a carry, which is solid for this league, of course. 4 rushing touchdowns is tied for 1st in the league with De'Veon Smith. He's 2nd overall in rushing yards. He has the most rushes without a single fumble, of course, with that being at 66. He is tied 9th in receiving yards and 1st in YAC by over 100. He's taken a lot of these short little screen passes for significant gains. He only has 17 receptions, yet is over 200 yards total. When you see more YAC than receiving yards, that means that you're getting those screens 5, 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and then you're taking off and getting a lot of yardage. He is the scrimmage yards leader right now, and it's no shock that he's that. Because again, he has over 400 yards of scrimmage through 5 weeks, which normally averaging close to 100 per game is pretty damn difficult to do in spring football. I think he easily deserves the number 2 spot. I think after the first 2 weeks, we had him as the MVP favorite. Then it was a bit of a fall off the next couple weeks. He still was good, but just wasn't as good, and the guy at number 1 has cemented himself at number 1. But I would not be shocked if Saylors ends up getting MVP this season. But number 1, to the surprise of nobody, is Bryce Perkins. The best quarterback usually gets the MVP. Now, spring football, we have seen that be different. Obviously, we did see a wide receiver win it back in 2022 in the USL with Quante Turpin. But Perkins this season has just been too efficient as a passer. He had one weaker game, but even with that, look at his stats overall. He is dominating in all of these stats. Passer rating, he's number 1 by a pretty damn wide margin. Yards per pass, he's 1st in the league of guys who will qualify for that. Completion percentage, he's 1st of guys that are qualified. He's still 3rd in passing yards. He's still up there in passing touchdowns. He's 2nd in that stat. He only has 2 interceptions, which is tied for 7th. He's only taken 4 sacks. So despite being a mobile quarterback, who granted has only been running the past couple of weeks, he's only taken 4 sacks. Now, yes, one of those interceptions was an awful pick 6 that he shouldn't have thrown. That was bad. But again, that's still a 2-to-1 TD interception ratio. And then rushing-wise, he has 2 fumbles, which is bad, but he hasn't lost them, and he has 3 more touchdowns on the ground to give him 9 total. And again, he hasn't rushed as much as we'd like to see him do, but the fact that he hasn't had to in a statistical sense is a big deal. We all agree that the biggest issue for this team has been Nolan playing Danny Etling. Most of us pretty much agree that if Danny did not play against the Battlehawks, the Panthers do win, because then instead of him throwing an interception which leads to a Battlehawks touchdown, odds are Perkins gets some sort of score before half and they end up winning. Again, we don't know that for sure, but that's what a lot of people would say. Perkins is finally going to be the full-time starter legitimately. Nolan recently announced, like yesterday, that Perkins is the starter and will play the full game, which we've been waiting to see. Again, his stats this season are just insane compared to everybody else. He is having one of those just truly efficient seasons, just like we saw Perez do last year, where he's both good in the cumulative stats and the, qualitative stats. The quantitative and qualitative. Both the counting stats and the stats like passer rating, like yards per pass. If you're good in both of those stats, it is far more impressive than just being good at either of them. You would rather have somebody who's top 3 in both of them than somebody who's first in one side and 5th in the other. Because this means that he is legitimately doing everything. Add in the rushing ability, and it's pretty clear cut that as of now, he's the MVP favorite. Again, I would say at this moment, the top 4 guys are pretty much fighting for the award, with a few guys sneaking up in the rear. There are certain players that could potentially pull it off. Again, if Jay Adams goes back to those early week forms with Davis back and West Hills being signed, we could see him do something. We could see Odom dominate. We could see DC defender player do something. But at the moment, I think these top 4 are pretty clear, and I think that right now it's mainly a 2-man race between Sailors and Perkins. But we'll see how the season plays out. Overall, that'll do it. This has been Zon Fox. Enjoy this video. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified about any videos. Again, I should be having the Tank Bowl video come out tomorrow based on this past weekend's Tank Bowl between the Roughnecks and the Brahmas. Let me know down below who you think the MVP is through midseason. What are your top 5 guys? Think about becoming a community member for as low as 99 cents a month. You get an exclusive video every month, team emojis, as well as a few other benefits. And as always, guys, have a great night.